All right, welcome. It is an election night for the primary municipal election for the city of Detroit. I am Kari Frazier, and I am in studio with one of the people that have anchored so much of this Detroit Next project in partnership between Detroit is Different and Bridge Detroit. But really, the production and a lot of the what happens behind the scenes of it is the man right here. Bryce, how are you doing today, my brother?
Oh man, I'm good, man. I'm good. I got to talk to a lot of Detroiters today. I got to
Mm.
be out in the community, which is one of my favorite things. I'm excited to see these results come in.
Yes. And so far, the number one thing that is definitely being uplifted is that it is low voter turnout.
Yes.
That's what is being uplifted. So many from polling locations, from people that I spoke to, they were like, man, I was at a location all day with the campaign, and it was about 25 people that they ran across. This is something that really this weekend raised a lot of interesting discussion points. We even had a phone call about it because of a Free Press article actually talking about it.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about what that was happening and even how the city responded to that. What was your take on that?
Yeah. So, one of the first things to note is that the free article, the column by Nancy Kaffer, shout out to Nancy Kaffer. She wrote it with the whole intention of really just dissecting the turnout issue that we've seen for the past several election cycles,
Mhm.
not just at the municipal level, but certainly most prominent in the municipal elections. People just not showing up to the polls, and it's not something that we like to discuss because it's such a systemic thing, right? It involves so many different problems in the city when it comes to the turnout issue. But she just laid it out bare and was like, yo, we are going to talk to people in the lowest voter turnout precincts and just ask them what's up. Ask them why they're not voting.
Yeah, I thought that the article read well, and it's something that I've uplifted for a while. That a lot of this looks like sometimes it's like, okay, people just don't know, and it's voter disenfranchisement, which I do think people are repressing people's right to vote, and it's a lot of like disenfranchisement, but it's also a lot of apathy for many
Right.
reasons. And I also think that political structures that have been in place have taken advantage of a lot of that apathy.
Right.
So it just shows like a disconnection that has existed. The other thing to uplift is that Detroit, up until really the Duggan administration, was a very, very active, even municipal election. It was oftentimes you see more people engaged in municipal elections than even state run elections,
Right.
but that's changed under this current administration.
Right. I think one of the things that I noticed when I was reading the article and I was thinking about the conversations I've had with people, it's not that people don't know, it's that they know enough about city government to really see their vote as futile. Now, I don't believe their vote is futile. I think everyone should vote. I really believe in the philosophy of making your voice heard through your vote. But I also can't blame people who have seen time and time again we vote for this thing and then our power as Detroiters gets taken away from us in one way or another. I mean, emergency management is the thing I think that was the catalyst for
Mhm.
the chronically low turnout that we see
Yes.
today.
Very much so. Really, even going back to what happened with the Detroit Public Schools,
Yeah.
going back to the bonding issues, which is interesting because it goes into the EAA, which kind of connects to the current administration in certain ways. But
Right.
furthermore than that, I think it's a pulse of the nation right now too, because I do think that the federal administration and what's taking place federally, and also some of the people's feelings about the state not necessarily advocating for the city as well, has been one of those things that's led to a lot of people feeling like, okay, what's happening politically, and furthermore, what's in it for me politically. And the number one thing that really has been uplifted in a lot of these elections also is, with this Detroit Next project, we've interviewed every mayoral candidate that's on the ballot,
Yes.
right?
All nine of them.
All nine of them.
Check
And
those interviews out if you haven't already.
yeah, we're gonna play some clips even tonight, and start with a clip from Mary Sheffield, just like kind of talking about some of the work that she's done in this and her pursuit for mayor. But I also think that a lot of people feel as though in a lot of what's happened, they don't feel this revitalization of Detroit has been something revitalizing for their communities and their neighborhoods.
Right. It's this idea that no matter what we choose to do, the money, the power, the resources is going to exist somewhere that is not in our neighborhoods. That is a feeling that I heard echoed a lot today, actually. Even amongst people that are voting, even amongst people that are avid or that are adamant about voting every single election. People, they just want to see that dynamic change. And a lot of people that I asked, why did you support this candidate? It's because they think that that candidate can address that dynamic.
It it's interesting that you said that. What did you see, and how many polling locations did you go past today and interact with? What was some of the things kind of brought up throughout?
Yeah. So every election, whether it be municipal, state, federal, I always go around to polling places, and that's how I spend the bulk of my day, any election day. Today, I only hit 8 locations, which
Mm,
is a very low number for me. Normally, I hit somewhere closer to 15 to 20 to try to get a bigger chunk of the city. But today, I spent more time at each location than I typically do, uh, partially because the turnout numbers weren't great, but also because the things I was hearing from Detroiters, I just felt like it was more useful for me to like really sit and listen with people for a little bit longer. Listen to people explain their gripes, explain their criticisms of each of the candidates. Also explain their criticisms of us in the media or not necessarily fully divulging information about the candidates the way that they like. So I'll go through my top 3 takeaways. The first, a lot of Mary Sheffield supporters all across District 2, which is where I spent most of my day, Districts 2 and 5. And obviously,
mhm,
Sheffield currently represents District 5. So no surprise there. I heard a lot of people asking me about the city council candidates.
hmm,
For people who don't know, Bridge Detroit, we did a candidate forum for each of the city council districts, the at-large race and the Board of Police Commissioners race, even though they're not on the ballot till November. And we did that because we know in these primaries, city council races kind of go under the rug. So a lot of people were asking me about the city council candidates, particularly in 2 and 5 where I was at.
mm,
And then lastly, the one of the biggest takeaways is that there is a desire amongst Detroiters for a candidate who really speaks to what's happening in the neighborhoods. Now that's something I could have told you before election day, but it's something that was reaffirmed to me over and over and over again today amongst not just the people voting, but the people passing out literature, the people who were working the polls. It's just we want a candidate who can address this place, these neighborhoods,
mm,
even in the well-off neighborhoods, I
mm.
should add.
So when you talk about like that candidate that addresses the well-off neighborhoods and wherever out, just more so a Detroit candidate that's on behalf of Detroit. And always the elephant in the room with the Duggan administration. This is a Detroit is different take, really more so a Kari Frazier take. But this is a black city that's had a white mayor and white leadership from that executive seat for now, 3 administrations. That is something that even when you go across the nation, people are like, wow, for real?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that identity, that understanding, what will happen under that, looking at something new, because definitely all signs look like we're going to have a black mayor coming back in the city of Detroit.
Oh yeah. I think black representation, black leadership is definitely, unless there's one writing candidate who is not black, and
Mhm.
unless he pulls off the greatest upset we've seen in a long time here, we're gonna have a black mayor. We are likely to have the first
Woman
female
mayor.
mayor
Mhm.
or the first pastor to make it as mayor. Those are
Mhm.
two, Solomon Kinlock and Mary Sheffield and Santel Jenkins. Those three make up most of the votes that I heard today. Most of the people I talked to are voting for one of those three. So it's very likely that one of those three is going to be mayor, and it would be a first for the city, regardless of who it is.
But also, when you talk about that, somebody that's definitely done a lot of work in the city that has been more and more in the hearts and minds of people leading into this election has been Attorney Todd Russell Perkins.
Yes.
And that and what he's run in his campaign, just kind of connecting to the people. I mean, you're seeing his lawn signs almost like everywhere on the east side,
They're
but
popping up like
a lot
dispensaries, man.
west too. And with the low voter turnout, the money raised and what we would think of like the campaign financing reports, all that information that came out last week. I don't know. It could. It's no telling what we may see as these numbers start rolling in shortly.
Right. And I think it's interesting to point out when we first started getting polling numbers, there was still this a massive amount of undecided votes.
Undecided.
So really, that second place spot, I think first, I think it's pretty easy to say Sheffield's probably going to get the top spot based on polling, based on fundraising, based on everything that we've seen from campaign finance, and just the number of voters I talked to today. I think that's pretty safe to say. I would love to be, I don't want to say I'd love to be wrong, but if I was wrong, I'd be really interested to see what happened. That number 2 spot, though, it does leave a big avenue for Todd Perkins, who I kind of have as the dark horse in this race. I see an avenue for victory. That avenue is going to come through that large number that was undecided.
That and also it's 2 city council seats that are up. One District 7, Fred Durhal, and Fred Durhal's been raised funding, been definitely pounding the pavement as well. I wanted you to talk a little bit about, you were in D5, another open seat.
Yes.
What were people saying in reference to city council there?
The thing with D5 that's interesting is there's so many people running that I didn't consistently hear one candidate get mentioned more than others. I think there is, because when you have that many candidates running, especially in a municipal election where voter turnout's not great typically, in an election where it's an open seat run by someone who was very well known and has a very high profile compared to the people who are now running for that seat, it leaves this big vacancy where everyone is kind of like, okay, what parts of the district can we get a stronghold over to win enough votes to be that top spot?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be interested in that. But with that, we're going to open up with this clip from Detroit Next with Mary Sheffield, Malachi. You guys going to see Malachi. He's going to pop in sometime in this broadcast tonight. But definitely check out one of the clips from Detroit Next, which you need to be connected to Detroit Next. This is a show that we put together. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit.
Called yourself the most qualified candidate in this race. Tell me about some of the things that you've been able to accomplish in the last decade, being at the top of the council.
Yeah, so aside from the people's bills, which I do encourage the listening audience to go view.
BridgeDetroit.com, we got some reporting on that as well.
Yeah, please do, and thank you for covering that, because it's really over 20 pieces of legislation that really came from grassroots up. It came from the people, it came from listening to the concerns of everyday voices and responding not with just rhetoric, but literally with sound policy to address those issues. So over 20 pieces of legislation. Aside from that, just the investment in parks, the amount of economic development, the $1 billion that we've created in affordable housing over the last 8 to 10 years, I definitely played a huge role in getting that happen, making that happen. The amount of jobs that we've created for Detroiters, the investment in our parks, the crime reduction that we see in Detroit, all of these things are in partnership with the city council in my office to ensure that the progression of our city is moving forward.
I want to dive into a couple of those. But first, I want to talk a little about the budget process, because I feel like that's a really good example of some of the things that we're talking about. The council spends quite a bit of time, in these budget meetings talking about making changes to fund their priorities. But, the council has a limited amount of control over that. Those conversations kind of talk about 3% of the overall budget, I think. And there were a lot more requests this year for different council priorities. Some which you got funded, some not. If you were mayor right now, what would be different about this current budget?
The current budget or just the process?
I would say the budget. Like what didn't get in the budget that you would
I would.
All right, we'll have some more clips, as I don't know what just happened with that clip, but I have another clip from Mary that is going to definitely come up. And also, when we think of Mary, we're talking policy. And we mentioned Attorney Perkins also speaking a lot about policy, especially specific to the land bank. The land bank is one of those issues that a lot of people have spoke to. And have had a lot of questions into things. So we want to cover that and definitely talk directly to that. But before we even get into that, we're going to welcome in from We Own Everything and also public comment to Mesa Bailey. This is an election day, so I know it definitely has you excited. A lot of low voter turnout. What's your take on that, Mesa?
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Election night is one of my favorite nights. I usually, I'm staying up all night trying to watch every single vote come in. And it really saddens me to hear that the voter turnout is going to be low. But I think that that's something that we sort of saw coming. We understand that there's reasons for people to be apathetic, and a lot of times in local elections, I don't like to see it. One of my missions with We Own Everything is to help people become more politically engaged, to understand how politics and policy really impacts your life, and to try to use that to propel them to be a part of the political process and cast a ballot to vote. But I understand that that's a heavy lift. That is a long road. But I think that, with this election being one that people have been having their eyes on, people have been glued to the television, people have been seeing a lot of these candidates and a lot of their yard signs. I'm hoping that this election will be the catalyst to raise voter turnout in future elections if we don't see a lot of voter turnout tonight. So I always hate to hear about low voter turnout, but I understand, what the issues are. And I just hope that, this is a watershed moment in Detroit politics where people really understand, like, okay, if we get out and vote, we can actually change things and get new people in there and get new blood and new activities. And also too, this is just the primary, right? August 5th is the primary. This is kind of where we narrow things down. So you will still have another opportunity to vote in November, right? When we narrow it down to 2 candidates, you can still have another opportunity to vote. So primary numbers are typically very low. We already know that. So hopefully in the general, we'll see a lot more turnout and we'll see people, getting out to vote in higher numbers, hopefully. But we still have time to get out
Called
and
yourself
vote.
the most qualified candidate in.
All right. Oh man. So let's see. We working out. I got my
Got it.
clip back. But I do want you to finish your point before we go to that clip.
Yeah, that was my final point. Tonight's the primary election. While I'm very excited about us narrowing down these candidates to 2, I wish that the voter turnout was a little bit higher, but there's still going to be another opportunity in November to vote in the general election. And so we still have an opportunity to promote people going out and voting and casting their ballot, because this is going to be a pivotal moment. Detroit hasn't had a new mayor since 2013. Right. And so we want to make sure that if we're going to live in this city, we need to be politically engaged. And the main way, one of the primary ways of doing that is voting. And in November, I hope that we see those numbers increase.
Before you go to that clip, can I ask a quick follow-up to Mesa? There's this discussion that me and my friends were having in the group chat all weekend. Who is the voter turnout? Whose responsibility is it to increase voter turnout? Is that on the candidates who are running, trying to galvanize voters, or is that the city clerk who is trying to get information out about voting?
You know what? That's a great question. And I would actually say both. I think it is the responsibility of governmental actors in general and candidates in general to make sure that people are engaged in the political process. This is a nonpartisan issue. Our country was built to be a democracy, and we should, as a government, want our citizens to participate in that democratic process. And so if we want people to participate, then we need to make it easy for them. We need to, have policies that are inclusive. We need to make sure that the information gets out. And candidates, if you, want people to come out and vote for you, make it worth their while. Let them know what you're going to do. Talk about the policies, talk about the issues, energize people, galvanize people, because in this day and age, people are going to need another reason to vote. We are looking towards the future nowadays, and we want to understand, how are we going to get more money in our pocket? How are our lives going to be made better? How are our kids going to be safe and be able to go to a good school? Like, these issues are really important, and they are all a part of the governmental system. You can't escape the government, right? And so governmental actors need to make it clear that they want individuals to participate in this political process, and they need to show us that they are willing to help us do that. And so I think it's the responsibility of all of us.
be rebuilt or to be demolished and to turn into innovative ways to address our housing needs in Detroit. And so maybe just shifting some of the priorities towards things that I've always advocated for, right? And so those are some of the things that I will probably change. And also, I think there should be a participatory budgeting process, which I've been very vocal about, which other cities do have, that allows a certain amount of the budget to go into community so that community can decide where they would like those funds to go.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting conversation as part of this budget process. A lot of other cities do this. It basically sets aside a portion of the budget that the city, or that residents can get, actually even potentially vote on how it works a little bit differently depending on the city. So if you were mayor, would you like to implement that as part of the budget?
Yeah, I'm definitely open to it. I think there's models that have already been implemented in other cities that work. Understanding we have to have fiscal discipline. And I'm very aware of that, as I've approved over 12 budgets now to date that have been balanced. But I do think it's something special that allows residents to feel empowered throughout the budgetary process. And if there is a certain amount that we can allocate, that community can have a say-so over where those funds go, I've always supported that, because again, it's about empowering residents to feel a part of the democratic process.
You talked about moving demolition funds to affordable housing. We're kind of coming to the end of this era of demolition. And I wonder if you feel that we've been too heavy-handed on the demo side instead of the rehabilitation and preventing properties from getting so bad that they have to be torn down.
Yeah, that's been a challenge. I think, no doubt we have had to clear Detroit. There's been a lot of blight in the city, a lot of vacant structures, homes, and commercial as well. But I think there are a vast amount of Detroiters, and even from my own eye, that could say that there are so many structures that could have been saved and preserved, and more of an effort really to how we create paths to home ownership and rehabilitating homes to put people in them. And so that would be more of a focus for me. And now that a lot of the vacant land is clear now we have the ability to rebuild Detroit. And that is my focus, is how we create infill housing, how are we creating paths to home ownership, and allowing community to have a say-so in the development of their communities.
There's some interesting conversations going on about the future of the land bank as well.
Oh my gosh,
right?
yes.
They will no longer receive a subsidy from the city this year because they've got a big fund reserve. And you have recommended that some of the programs and responsibilities the land bank has should come under the housing department, come under the city's control. What do you see for the future of the land bank if you're mayor? How would you change anything about the organization?
I think a part of the first 100 days in office is really re-examining all of the current state of programs and departments and trying to figure out how we can overall improve customer service and ensuring that government is effective and efficient. And I think any new administration should do that. And the land bank will be a part of that process. I have always been vocal that, the land bank has its purposes. But I think that the transparency and the accountability is missing because it is an authority. And so I would love to see some functions come back in and be more innovative and creative in how we can use that vacant land to empower residents, again, to be homeowners, and for other issues and quality of life things that we see fit. And so the land bank will be something that we'll discuss. I'm not going to say, here today that they will be dismantled or what operations will move in. But I do think that there will be a serious look at how we can better improve the processes and ensure that people, Detroiters, can have access to property. It bothers me so much when I hear people who have been maintaining lots and can't get access to land that they've been maintaining for years, and they're trying to develop projects in their community, but there's so many issues and barriers with the land bank. And again, I would love more transparency and more city involvement in those discussions so that we're empowering Detroiters to develop the cities in which they live. So that will be something on the table to examine and to have a thorough assessment on how we can better improve.
So you've
All right, now, as I said, Attorney Perkins, Todd Russell Perkins is running, also speaks a little bit to the land bank. And I think that this clip is also very much something that people need to be thinking about in reference to the land bank and everything that is happening with the land bank. So let's see here. All right, Attorney Perkins. I'm looking for our clip here.
All right, let's improv while he. Let's riff a little bit while he looks for that clip.
Let's do it.
So, land bank. Have you heard a lot of people talk about the land bank this election cycle?
I have actually. I have heard people talk about the land bank this election cycle, but more so, I've heard people talk about the land bank down at City Council, at the City County building. People get super upset when even the land bank is mentioned. actually one of the candidates on the ballot tonight, Mary Waters, running for at large, an incumbent for at large, has made it her business to talk about the land bank, and to try to let people know like the land bank is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so yeah, it's been one of those issues. We talked about it on public comment about how they took away that the city council took away that subsidy because the land bank has so much money in reserve already, and it's because that's one of the things that people talk about all the time. It's like, why are we giving the land bank all this power? A regular Detroiter can't even really get land from the land bank. They are requiring all these different things, and then they kind of, they can take your land from you at any given moment. And there's all these problems with the nuisance abatement program that they do. So yeah, it's talked about all the time. It's been talked about in this election, and then the new mayor is going to have a decision to make. Do you get rid of the land bank? Do you abolish the land bank? And if you do, what do you do with all that land? Do you bring it back under the city? Is it going to be run by planning and development? And what's going to happen with all that? But I know one thing: Detroiters want to see something done as it relates to the land bank. What do you think, Bryce?
Yeah, we heard people talk about this at each of our candidate forums. Most people, to be honest, wanted it completely demolished from when we talked to people. There are a few candidates, Joel Hashim being one in particular, who I know is just like very adamant, like, let's get rid of it. But at the same time, we've heard people like Councilman Scott Benson, Councilman James Tate talk about what it was like before the land bank existed and the city just couldn't keep up with those properties. So I'd be really curious to see whoever wins this mayoral race in November, how they plan to deal with that issue, because no matter what, they're going to be upsetting somebody. There's a large contingent of Detroiters who just want it gone. If you appease them, just get rid of it. Well, then now the city has to manage all those properties and all that land. And what does that look like after the city hasn't been doing that for such a long time?
Right. That is the question. Where do we go? What do we do? How do we solve this problem? Because the land bank is an authority, right? And so because it's an authority, it's a different type of governmental entity, right? It has a lot of autonomy. It can do a lot of different things. And so people want to see the city take control over the land bank or do something to the land bank, or make the land bank do things that the city can't necessarily make it do outside of abolishing it or changing its MOU. And so the next administration and the next council, honestly, because the MOU has to be voted on by council, we'll have to make some decisions about that. And it's going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, as much as I'm looking for this next clip, and it's like, man, that would be with the other files that I gotta get. I do have some information from one of the developers talking about the ways and the barriers of entry of what to do in reference to what you can do with land. So the Detroit Next project not only interviewed some candidates, but also some different people in this space, and Chase Cantrell was one of them that spoke to some of those barriers of entry and what people deal with in reference to what you can do with land.
Yeah, real quick before you start that clip, I actually did run into Chase at the polls today.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, D2, man, District 2, running into celebrities.
D2, that would be fitting. That would be fitting. Let's see.
He's been doing an education series on tax incentives to help people understand how all of that works, and often. I hear them say that people are misinformed and they're given bad information about how tax incentive works, and that's why people are so upset with it. How important is civic education to all of this? Not only to make sure that people are coming to the table and knowing what they're advocating, but also to maybe push back on some of these potentially unfair characterizations of where people's understanding is at.
People understand what they want to see in their community. Right. So some of the pushback is culturally what you are building does not reflect the neighborhood. Right. So just from that starting point, right, you don't need to have an economics understanding of a development project to know that. Other parts of it is people are trying to access the system and know that they're unable to get a house from the land bank, right? That house across the street that I keep talking about. So you don't need to understand a pro forma to understand those kinds of policies. But civic education is important, right? Especially when we're talking about our larger development projects and the community benefits ordinance process. I sit on the Equitable Development Task Force for the City of Detroit. We are reviewing the community benefits ordinance, and one of the things that we look at is when a neighborhood advisory council, residents who are elected to this council have to represent their neighbors, Many of them don't understand, again, the economics of a deal, and they're negotiating with teams who are very sophisticated and have, lawyers and real estate specialists who do understand the nuances and details. So civic education, especially when it comes to really large projects, is extremely.
I'm glad you brought that up. I've watched a handful of these community benefits negotiations now from start to finish.
Me too.
And they are a little frustrating in that you see the expertise deck being stacked against residents, the people who serve on these and for folks that don't know, the community benefits ordinance, on paper is a very powerful tool. We passed a kind of neutered version of a different proposal that might have been a little bit stronger, but in general, it requires developers who are pursuing pretty massive projects and seeking public financing to sit down with a group of residents who represent the surrounding kind of area and negotiate benefits in exchange for the tax breaks that they're hoping to get from the city. And so, if used well, that could be something that really creates a lot of additional investment in neighborhoods. But I think, to your point, folks don't come with this understanding, and they're up against people that, it's their job and they've gotten a lot of training and are paid a lot of money to do these projects. What are the shortcomings of that ordinance, do you think? I mean, I've talked with Council President Sheffield about the need to reform it. I haven't seen anything actually presented at this point.
Nothing's been presented yet, and I don't know that there's a huge appetite to change it until probably after this election.
Yeah.
But one is the speed, right? Like these meetings happen very quickly, and there aren't that many of them. So you have to, if you are a resident elected to the Neighborhood Advisory Council, you have to get up to speed very quickly. Which is difficult. There is some training that the city provides, but it's provided by the city, not trusted third party. So they are not represented by external counsel. So that's a few shortcomings. And then the mayor and city council appoint most of the NAC. So there's only 2 members of that committee that actually get appointed by their neighbors. So even just thinking of who sits on these committees, a lot of them themselves are connected in some way to either the development infrastructure or the elected infrastructure. So there's some shortcomings that could be.
All right. Kari had to go downstairs to do something, so I had to jump in his chair real quick. So we're talking about, we were just looking at the preliminary numbers coming in. What can you kind of give an update on for now?
Yeah, so just looking at the preliminary numbers, so I'm on DetroitMI.gov on the election results site. And right now it is 9:04. I don't know exactly when these returns came in, but polls just closed at 8 o'clock. So as of right now, that's showing on the website 2,359 voters for the mayor. And of those, Mary Sheffield has 43.68% of the vote right now at 1,029 votes. The second highest is Reverend Solomon Kinlock, who has 538 votes, and that is 22.84% of the vote. So currently, and it's very early, y'all. Like it's probably not
Very
even-
early.
It's so early that this probably don't even really matter. But I just wanted to put that out there that those are the top 2 right now. And we have Suntil Jenkins at a close third with 395 votes, and she has 16.77% of the vote. And then Member Durhal, no, actually, after Suntil is Todd Perkins with 168 votes. And so that's the preliminary numbers right now. Again, it's very, very early, but I just want to share that with you all since I am following along online.
Yeah, the preliminary numbers, and like I say, I'm back in the seat. It's like all types of stuff moving around. We learning this because November we gonna have this clutch in there. So with that, thank you so much, Bryce, of where things kind of were going. And then even talking so much about like some of those pieces and some of these different people, but so many more of the candidates. You gathered a good amount of clips too. I don't even know which one you would like me to go to in reference to, playing something.
So it's funny. I actually had them all synced up in order in the folder on my hard drive, and
Uh-huh.
then I forgot my intern, Jonathan. Shout out to Jonathan.
Shout
He
out
has the
Jonathan.
hard drive, and he is on his way to Cleveland right now.
There you go.
So you can really you can jump to any clip from actually go to I can't see the names because the font's too small. There's a clip from Kinlock I want you to play from when Malachi interviewed him, because I think as we're looking at some of these the very, very early numbers, seeing him in second place is not a shock to us. He is actually the first candidate we had on Detroit Next. The very second episode we did. I mean, I guess the third episode we did because we did a pilot and had to redo it. But the very second episode that aired, we had Kinlock on talking about the social safety net. And I think it speaks to a little bit about why he gained steam so early. Just talking about things that like really affected the bottom line for Detroiters. It affected kind of the day-to-day struggle for Detroiters.
All right. I don't have that clip, but I do got a Kinlock clip that's similar in scope. So let's go to.
I ask because the mayor, Mayor Duggan, has talked a lot about this. I think $1 billion affordable housing investment over the last 5 years or so. It's created about 5,000 units, a little bit shy of 5,000. So, I mean, realistically, it's going to take a lot of money. And even the amount of money that's been invested has not reached that 10,000 number. So I hear you're saying, let's get more aggressive. Let's get the community involved. But how realistic is that? And what is really the timeline for building?
That's a realistic timeline. I believe that when you look at the houses that you already have and you look at the opportunity to explore new technology and the new ways of construction, and when you're building in mass, I believe through collaboration that is not, although it's a Herculean task, I don't believe that there's a hurdle that we cannot overcome in order to achieve that. One of the things that I think we have to consider is that it's already been done. When you sit down and ask foundations right now, just in the metropolitan area, they're distributing hundreds of millions of dollars. Just imagine if we had a holistic vision, a comprehensive vision that people can see and not just do it. And there's a lot of good work going on, but not just do it to feel good about it, but to do it knowing that every dollar is designed to drive us to a particular destiny, to a particular vision. I think we can harness those partnerships and those resources and not leave all of those resources on the table and get to the end of the year and say, what happened? But I think we can use those resources in a way in partnership to accomplish Herculean things like affordable housing.
I had seen Cranes reported that most of the building permits for housing in the last, I think it was for 2024, were for multi-family units. That's certainly what I've seen watching city council that gets approved. What do you envision for those housing units? I mean, are we talking about rental complexes? Are we talking about single family homes, duplexes? Probably the whole gamut, right? But what does that actually look like?
Well, I think it's a plethora of things. I think we have to really investigate what housing look like. And we have to be open to make sure that we're addressing the fact, because you can't tell someone that's making $30,000 a year that $2,000 is affordable housing. At the end of the day, we have to come up with economical ways for people to be put on the path where they own a home and are able to sustain that home. And so we're continuing to listen to what the needs and the desires of the community is as of right now. And one of the things that we will continue to do is be flexible. When you have almost 60% of people surveyed in a poll saying they don't trust institutional and career politicians, that's because we come in and we lower and we make unrealistic promises. One of the things that we will not do is make a promise that we're not going to stand behind. But the other part of that, we're not going to let people come in and prostitute the people of our city and make promises to them and not stand behind the promises they make. That's where we start losing credibility and start losing trust. And so, Malachi, we're still listening because we want people to be a part of this conversation and a construction of what this agenda will look like.
All right, so that's Solomon Kinlock coming in for Detroit Next. I remember that interview. As you said, that was the first candidate to be welcome in Detroit Next, and that was early on after the deaths of the children that were in the casino parking lot. And so much in speaking of that, so a lot of how to connect with families and connect with homes. Another candidate big in that, definitely from a social work background, as we know, is Santil Jenkins. And Santil Jenkins definitely has a take on what would people be looking for. And let's see here. We want to bring in another one of these clips as we bring in all these video files of so many folks. Let's see here. Santil Jenkins.
Do this, the mayor has a big job, but it's not solely on their shoulders.
Right.
There's a cabinet, there's department heads.
Mhm.
Mayor Duggan brought on a lot of people that he had kind of crossed paths with, worked under him in his various roles before becoming the mayor at the Detroit Medical Center and at the county and some of the other jobs that he did.
Yes.
Do you have kind of a bench of people that you're going to be bringing in? Do you plan to keep a lot of continuity there with his administration staff? How would you kind of approach that?
It'll be a combination of both. There are people in the Duggan administration that are highly talented and are doing a good job. Those people I would work to keep. I know some of them are leaving as we speak.
Yeah.
So hopefully everybody, who is highly talented won't leave before the next mayor comes in, which I hope to be me. But also over my time, I have built up really strong relationships in nonprofit, across government, across philanthropy. The benefit of having worked with the corporate community and the philanthropy community and so many nonprofits is that I've worked with a lot of highly talented people that some of them I'm tapping as I work through my policies and my platform for this race, but also I tap them if the voters decide I should be our next mayor.
Mm-hmm. Are there particular departments that you see as being like more critical than others?
Wow. So the finance and budget departments are absolutely critical because that's where it all starts and ends, right? So making sure that we continue our revenue conferences, making sure that we continue our responsible fiscal practices, which have enabled us to increase our credit ratings, will be very important. So yes, that is critical. Another department that I think is critical that the city figures out and makes more efficient is building safety and engineering.
Mm-hmm.
It's right now about 77 steps to start a new business in the city of Detroit, which makes that's a real barrier to entry. If we want to be a city that is business friendly and we say we want to attract investment and innovation and jobs, we have to make it easier to do that. So our licensing process, the permitting process for businesses and for residents. When I talk to residents, if you're having your kitchen remodeled, you have to have 3 inspectors. You got to take off work 3 times for them to inspect your kitchen. That's not the way it should be. If 3 inspectors could show up at the same time, why wouldn't we make it easier for our residents and businesses?
On the inspection point, the city has made some changes in the last year to its rental inspection process for housing.
Yes.
Basically to streamline that because there was a huge checklist and it ultimately did not really improve the number of rental properties that were coming into compliance with the city. Right. They found that, punishing people going through the kind of enforcement mechanism wasn't working. Right. So let's try to make it easier and work with.
That's right.
I'm imagining there's probably some crossover with your work at Thaw as well, seeing homes in substandard conditions.
Absolutely.
What would you do to help improve conditions of the housing in the city, for renters in particular?
And first, I want to say, I think that's a great example of the importance between understanding when you're writing a law and when you have to execute, right, and manage based on that law.
What is the outcome
difference
of the policy?
Right,
Yeah.
That's right. And having a rental registration policy that encourages people not to register their property or makes it very hard for people to be in compliance is not the answer, right? And you have unintended consequences because we can inspect homes that we don't know are being rented. So yes, I've seen that at Thaw. And we have to find the balance and make sure that homes are safe, that they continue to be affordable, but the living conditions. If we're charging people to live in a home, the living conditions have to be healthy, and it's got to be safe for families, seniors, and kids.
You had mentioned earlier you're hoping that there's not a complete exodus of, of Duggan officials. Do you see yourself as bringing some continuity between yourself and the Duggan administration? A lot of the folks that are in this race have talked about how he's done a good job, and we want to keep some of those things continuing, but also, they have their own vision for things. Where do you kind of fall along that? How much continuity are you trying to pitch to Detroiters of what we've seen over the last, 10 plus years under him?
All right, so that is Santil Jenkins and Malachi Barrett, Detroit Next Clips. Definitely not just an interview here, but in other places. And in studio now, we have from the Black Fridays podcast and connected with a couple different candidates along the way. Santil Jenkins and Mary Sheffield. Denzel Turner. Mr. Turner, how are you doing today?
What up, though? I'm doing well. Appreciate you having me here.
All right, we're glad to have you in. And just from the tone and the outreach, what was the take? You have a podcast where you're targeting a lot of millennials, a lot of people talking about, the young people moving back, being in the city, wanting to start off in the city. That is the pulse of your audience. You had on a couple of candidates. What was the outreach? What was the take? How did people respond to it? And just what was your take with Santil and Mary?
Yeah, so I can start from me. It was more of a personal challenge to be able to get more civically involved, especially after what happened this past November in the White House. And I really just wanted to take the reins on being able to not only understand local government for myself, but being able to help my audience get tuned into what is happening around them from the local government standpoint. And so I knew that we had a huge mayoral election coming up, and I wanted to make sure I did my civic duty to help those people get informed by at least doing the reach out to have these candidates on the platform. And so I had the pleasure of interviewing Santil Jenkins and also Mary Sheffield, and then a representative, someone who was going after the District 5 City Council seat, George Adams Jr. as well. And so I'll start with Santil and just kind of giving the take on the opportunity I had to interview with her. It was during a platform between a collaboration with Citizen Detroit, shout out to them, and then also Politics on the Go, aka Pogo, and Arabia Simeon, who is the founder of that. And through their platform, I had the opportunity to do some podcast interviews with George Adams Jr. and then Santil Jenkins in a shorter form than my normal format. So my interviews typically go around 45 minutes on average. So with Santil only had 20. But from that conversation, I was able to get a lot of really helpful information from how she is viewing this election, how she's attacking it, and then more importantly, what are some things that we should be paying attention to as Detroiters that's coming up? And one of the things that you mentioned during our conversation was some of the financial hurdles that we're going to have to deal with. And I asked her straight up, I'm like, hey, is there anything that we are overlooking as far as the general public to this election? Because we have people who vote strictly off of feeling, vote off of hunches, and don't necessarily have the time and or the interest to really dig into, well, what are these candidates' platforms? Who are they aligned with? What do they do outside? And being able to keep a track record and tabs on everything that they do. So the approach I wanted to take for all of my interviews was really try to get to the human aspect, the person behind the political campaign, and really understand more of their story, what they're about, and what would they potentially bring to the table by inserting some of those political questions, but really just getting a understanding of who they are from a human aspect. And so I appreciated in the conversation that Santil was able to put us up on game from what I felt like as to what we should be thinking about from where this city is going to go financially once this Duggan administration is over and the next person is going to take over, and what they're going to inherit moving forward.
All right. Now I already see Bryce, because Bryce is on the pulse of a lot of the millennial scope, and more so like a lot of voters that wouldn't go. So I know you have some take on this too. What have you been hearing in that same realm in reference to a lot of Detroiters and millennials about that same topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard a lot of the same stuff you heard. Is we want a candidate who can speak directly to our fears, our anxieties, our desires to be homeowners here, to really settle down here, and not feel like we have to leave and go to Atlanta or LA or New York or Chicago, like people that are just a couple years older than us felt like they had to do. Um, Having said that, there weren't a lot of candidates who like addressed that head on, because they weren't often in rooms full of people our age to talk to like that. And it's not like Mary Sheffield hasn't addressed it, or even Jonathan Barlow or Santil or Todd. It's not like none of the candidates have talked about it. It's that they're not often in rooms that are just millennials, that are just Gen Z, that are just people who are that younger demographic. And a large part of that is because it's not part of the strategy to win an election here. To win an election here, you talk to the older voters who show up every time. And that is part of the stagnation that a lot of Detroiters, particularly millennials and Gen Z, and even some Gen X Detroiters, expressed to me today. You know, if you're a Gen X Detroiter, that means you could be anywhere between your very late 30s or early 40s and your 50s. And if they are also saying, yo, this is not adequately addressing our needs, maybe something needs to change. Maybe one candidate needs to just focus specifically on activating that younger core of Detroiters.
It's definitely the type of town, like most, where the ice cream socials are happening. Meaning like the senior citizen crowd and the retirement homes, you're pounding that pavement, because the thought process is they're definitely going to vote. They're definitely going to be engaged, and they're going to connect. To Mesa Bailey and Jerron Howard and some others were actually did a forum for the youth. And it was at WC3. I forget the date per se. I want to say, obviously, it was last month. But it was some city council candidates there and some mayoral candidates there at that. What was Mary Sheffield speaking to in reference to that, Denzel, that you could say even from your interview?
Yeah, from the conversation that I had with her, one thing that I do appreciate about um, her campaign team and just her approach to the campaign overall is that she is very inclusive of the younger demographic, and I would say probably she falls within the Gen or not Gen Z, millennial demographic, but then also empowers people that are of the Gen Z demographic as well, which is the next and upcoming generation of leaders in the city and the world as a whole. So one thing that I did appreciate was her attention to that particular group, and then also working towards empowering them and at least hearing them out. At minimum, hearing them out in some of the things that are of concerns to them, and then giving them platforms to be able to voice some of those concerns, at least for her campaign or to her camp directly during her run right now. And so that was one thing that I did recognize and thought that I like the specialized attention to that particular group, because I think it is important. And of course, if you're trying to win any campaign, textbook number one, you want to go beat the pavement at those retirement homes or those senior communities, churches, things like that. Of course, that's textbook 101. But I think it takes a specialized effort to be able to encourage young people to vote, and then also to try to incorporate them, or at least some of their ideologies, into what the future of a city could look like.
So with that, Bryce, we've set with this Detroit Next project, and even more, you immerse with Bridge Detroit. Me from a lens of Detroit is different. What are the things that a lot of the millennials you think need to be aware of that will be heading into this next mayoral tenure? Because I look at it, and when I often speak about this, like at the barbershop, and when people pass me, people are like, "Oh, you're talking like it's going to be doom and gloom." But I'm like, a lot of the chessboard is going to be reset. What do you think should be most in mind for that person that's thinking to themselves, "Let me get that first home. Let me think about what school I want my kids to go to, starting this family, getting married. What needs to be in mind for that?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is just the reality that we're not going to have the same resources at our disposal that we currently have under Duggan. We're not going to have the ARPA funds after next year. We're going to have the retiree pensions coming up, and we're not going to have a cozy relationship with the federal government the way that Duggan had with Biden.
All signs
So,
look like no.
right. So I think for young people, I don't want people to freak out. I don't want people to panic. I think now is the time to prepare for that reality. If you are someone that's looking to buy a house, make sure the finances are in order to not necessarily be able to rely on some of these programs that exist currently. Make sure that if you are someone that wants to start a family, you are thinking about, okay, the school district has its historic issues. What is this next mayoral administration going to be able to do to fill in those gaps, knowing we're not going to have the same resources? These are all things that should be top of mind, but also something that should be top of mind is we're going to have a new mayor, meaning the way that things feel like they just have to operate now under Duggan, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. There is a chance to change the way that politics functions here and stack that in the favor of younger Detroiters, people that are starting families, people that want to start families, people that want to start their careers and their businesses here. I think that both of those things should be top of mind. It's not going to be we're not going to be flooded with resources, but there's also an opportunity for people that have new creative ideas to really step to the forefront and, use the powers that be to shape the city the way that we want it to look.
Okay. One of my homies just tagged in. Definitely a great point, Con. Con Santori wrote a couple of articles on behalf of Bridge as he was shouting
Shout
it out
out.
on his Instagram, saying, like, all right, this is me jumping into the political realm, as he says, that federal relationship, along with getting a new governor, is major. We may be tapping you in for tonight's broadcast. So stay by your phone, my brother. But with that being said, some of this same scope as we're looking at what will happen next and what will people be prepared for. One of the big things, even within home ownership, that many people know too, is that cap. The cap that does exist. So a lot of the homes have been owned by people that may, on record, when you look at that deed, could be back in the 90s or early 2000s. And then that cap gets released. Man, that property tax that you think that you may pay could be 30, 40% more, you know?
Right. And that's in that 30 to 40%, for people that I've never bought a house, but I know just from looking at the process, that 30 to 40% can make the difference in, the neighborhood you want to live in versus a neighborhood that you might not view as desirable. It can make the difference in, a couple extra hundred, close to $1,000 on your monthly mortgage payments, depending on the price of the house when you bought it. So, 30 to 40%, if you don't have the context for what that means, it's really the time now. If that's something that you're looking for, if home ownership is something that you're trying to attain in the next 5 to 10 years, these are all things you should become intimately familiar with. And that doesn't mean you got to do it right overnight, because it takes a little time to learn this stuff. It's certainly for me. But it means you need to start the process of like understanding, what is that going to look like for me and my financial future.
So as we talk about financial future, now I got a clip that I want to play that you actually set up with Attorney Perkins, talking about helping distressed cities, because this is really what we're talking about. And if you have less, how do you maximize getting the more out of it is very
One
key.
more question for
Yes.
you. You're trailing in the polls, and some
Mhm.
people, by the time this interview airs, will have already cast their absentee votes.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people who are still left undecided.
Right.
So, what is your message to them, people who are kind of maybe waiting for one candidate to emerge or
Mhm.
have that one moment that makes them feel that's the one?
Right.
What is your message to them, and why should people be voting for you as opposed to people who are higher up in the polls who are seen as the more likely candidates to
Right.
make it past the primary?
Well, nothing is likely in this event, and nothing is um it's not something that we've seen. This is a unique election. Every election is unique. The very fact that no one has, or I don't believe no one has, I believe that I have separated myself in a lot of ways. The very fact that not getting on certain platforms or invited has created a murmuring in the crowds, and it has created a groundswell in the crowds. I don't necessarily trust a lot of the polling. And, particularly if you're looking at polling, and this is not just sour grapes at all. I can't be that person. I preach against it, so I'm not going to be that person. But what I will say is, if you're using polling, particularly if you're using polling from 2021, let's look at what we have. We have a declining constituent base voting over the years because a lot of people felt it was a foregone conclusion that Mr. Duggan was going to win. And that's why you don't have the turnout that you do. And so if you're looking at looking at people who voted in the last election, not only that, the last election, we were shrouded in the idea, or not the idea, the reality of the pandemic. So you saw some decline in that particular area. And so you're also looking at individuals, and what we're looking at, and we're touching upon people who've never voted. We're looking for those individuals. Voting starts, and I believe you can, I want the people to recognize that they can go register to vote, I believe, up until July 21st in order to vote August 5th. You're speaking of the absentee ballots that are going out, I think, on Monday, and people will have voted. I would say to you all, get this video out as soon as you can. Yeah, so then people will see it before they vote. But again, I tell people, look and check my record, check our websites, check what they say. And, what you leave sometimes, and I think when you leave a lot of these candidates, you leave with sometimes a certain sense of emptiness or vagaries that exist, and people speak topically and they talk in platitudes, and there's nothing detailed. Like, you and I can go on and on about this. It's just, not that I have all of the facts, all the information, but I know where the knowledge is buried, and I know how to mine that knowledge. And the thing is, I'm very upfront about the things I do know and I don't know. But having studied this long before the idea of casting my name as a candidate, I wanted to be prepared because the city of Detroit deserves that. We are at, I don't say Detroit, we've come a long way, especially when you look at the Midwesterner that says we're the second least favorable city in America to raise a family. We've come some distance, and we've held the dam from breaking. And that's where we're at. And now you need a leader who understands what we're up against. You need a leader who's demonstrated themselves. I've been in distressed cities for quite some time. And, those are cities that I represent as city attorney, but I've represented cities throughout and municipalities throughout this entire southeastern Michigan. And it has been something that's been, it's a great piece of work to be able to help cities, particularly the ones that are under distress. And that's what you have to do. But check the records and listen to what they're saying, and listen listen to whether or not you're inspired by what they say. But you don't want to vote because people have popular political names or just popular names. You don't want to do that because our vote is too important. I was sitting.
All right. Attorney Perkins definitely talking about how to engage. And when we talk about engaging, like we say, really the number one thing about this is some low numbers coming out for this primary. With those low numbers, a lot of the numbers are coming in high, where we got about 50% reporting at this point in time. And Mary Sheffield is way ahead of everyone else in the race.
Yeah, she's kind of mollywopping the competition at this moment. But what is interesting is the real race is for second place. We all knew that Sheffield was the front runner, but I think it's this race between Santil Jenkins and Solomon Kinloch. Kinloch with a slight lead over her right now. When you look at those numbers, what comes to mind for you as someone, you interviewed some of these candidates, Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the entire time, like you said, I think that it was absolutely a race for a second, and how a lot of let me think about this for a second, because what I think about in terms of with Solomon Kinloch and Santil Jenkins is that a lot of people initially, when Kinloch got into the race and put his hat in the ring, automatically assumed like, hey, he gonna be pretty much like first ballot, gonna be on this way, and put the rocket on him, and it's gonna be him and Mary. That's their race. But then as time went on, and then I believe from my recollection, I think Santil might have been the second to announce their candidacy after Mary. I could be wrong about that, but I, I I I started to see more of her after Mary had announced not too long after that, and so being able to kind of see her climb where it was always kind of just behind, kind of inching towards there, and then to get to a point where we started to see some of the preliminary polls that came out to show that she was ahead of him. even by a percentage point. That was very interesting to see. I think they've been kind of going back and forth between like who has 16, who has 15, or 14 and 15, however it works out. But it's very interesting to see, and that's the race that I'm really looking forward to. That's what I'm looking for tonight. Mary, I understood those numbers to be exactly what they are right now. I really wanted to know what was that second place going to be, because it seemed like the city was overall. I think that the pool of candidates was interesting enough to be able to have people splitting votes in different places for different reasons, but to be able to identify those two candidates, who's going to come out on top between those two. I figured it would be a close race, and so now I'm just waiting to see how it all pans out.
Yeah, and even with early numbers, is there anything surprising about what you see here? I don't know if you got to see. I'll just hand you my phone. Is there anything surprising about those numbers for you personally? For me, I'm a little surprised that Barlow is as low as he is.
Uh-huh.
Same with Hashim. I'm just a little surprised, not fully, but I expected them to maybe in this could change because it's just about 50% reporting. Those numbers can definitely go up, but I'm a little surprised at how low they are.
Yeah, so one thing that jumped out at me is that the fact that, let me make sure I'm looking at this correctly, that it is a that Todd Perkins has more votes right now currently than Fred Durhal, and I think that I initially felt that his seat on city council in proximity to different leaderships and things that's happening at the state level and the city level would give him more of a leg up or more of an opportunity to be able to have more of a footing in this race. But that was one thing that jumped out to me, and then also the James Craig numbers in terms of, I think that right now he would be number 4 or
Yeah,
somewhere on that list.
he's higher than Perkins, which I guess surprises me a little bit,
Yeah.
mostly because James Craig has kind of largely been absent from a lot of the forums lately.
Yes.
He showed up a lot early, um, and he didn't really impress a lot of the crowds he was in front of at forums where he was on stage with multiple candidates.
Hmm.
So I think maybe he backed off, and I don't know what he's been doing to campaign in the meantime. I assume him and his team have been pounding the pavement,
Yeah.
door knocking. I would assume.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I'm a little surprised at
And
the
also,
placement of some of these candidates.
yeah, and Danetta Simpson has more votes than John Barlow, who has pretty much been at everything and any and every
Right.
forum and taken any and every opportunity to be able to get his campaign and his name out there. And me personally, I haven't heard much from Danetta Simpson or much about. So just interesting to see that she is ahead of him, given the fact that I've seen more of his face than hers.
Yeah, well, I can definitely say this. Danetta has been on the ballots a couple of different times, so she's been present on some ballots. That's that has definitely been one of those things. Not as active, and I mean, she was speaking to just what was happening, but in reference to like a lot of this and what this state is, I want to play this clip from Karen Dumas, just kind of giving a scope of what would happen with this election.
Yeah.
Shout out Karen Dumas.
About the potential threat of the pension obligation, when it comes to the financial health of the city?
I have spoken with a few people who say that we're on track to be worse off than we were when we filed for bankruptcy.
In what way?
Just in terms of not having the money. Michigan Cap did a story not too long ago and talked about, I mean, they actually broke it down and talked about how we're in debt about $1,600 per resident. And so, I mean, you can't, you run it like you run your home. You can't pay bills if you don't have income.
Mhm.
If you've got a lot of debt, our debt in the bankruptcy was restructured. It wasn't eliminated. And we also lost a lot of our assets, which could have maybe in turn generated revenue.
Mhm.
So I just don't think it's as rosy as people would like to think.
We know that we have high property taxes in the city. A lot of
Mhm.
those taxes go to pay off debt that the city owes,
Mhm.
those pension obligations. There's been conversation among the candidates about property tax reform, finding new ways to raise revenue. I think there's also a general feeling that we should find a way to cut property taxes for
Mhm.
residents and bring costs down for them. But I think there's a question of how do you replace that revenue? And
Right.
how do you grow revenues overall? I mean, you're talking about us having less access to discretionary revenue, the ARPA money we've used to boost up not only like social programs, but build up our rec centers and actual do like, infrastructure projects. Not gonna have access to that money anymore. So I don't know. Do you have any ideas for strategies that mayoral candidates should be thinking about when it comes to the revenue
Well,
question?
they'd have to pay me for that,
Sure,
Malachi.
yeah.
But what I will say is that we do need an attraction and retention strategy as it relates to residents. So it's not just about getting new people in the city, but how do we take care of and make sure that those residents that have been here can benefit from any developments or any improvements in the city. I also think that, the quality of life is what will attract and retain. We also need a land use strategy. You can go to pockets of the city and they look great, they're pretty. But if you take a dive and you drive through the neighborhoods, they're horrible. They're no better than they were some time ago. So I don't think that you can coerce people into staying. The majority of Duggan's cabinet doesn't live in the city. And so I always feel like if the city is built with a level of quality where people can enjoy being here, then they'll want to be here. Education is an issue. Crime is still an issue. They say, oh, well, crime is down the lowest since the 60s. Well, so is the population. So statistically, it works out that way. But, people that are in the neighborhoods, and if you watch the news, you only get a thumbnail of it. But crime is still a real issue. This is still an urban city with a lot of problems. And I think it would be disingenuous for candidates to pretend that we're in the land of Oz because we're not.
Yeah, and we've heard candidates talk about the tale of two cities in Detroit. I think the top theme that I've heard emerge from all the candidates right now is this idea of like downtown versus the neighborhoods. Maybe not versus in like an antagonistic sense, but like in terms of where we're focusing our attention and our investment. People want to see that spread out more, like you're saying, into these kind of forgotten pockets of the city where things have not turned around as much as the shiny downtown. How does that kind of land with you as kind of a campaign theme?
Well, it sounds good and it reads well, but what's the strategy? Like, how do you do that? I think one thing that has been lost is a feeling of inclusion by people, residents here, especially Black residents. They may not say it publicly.
But they say it publicly too.
But when they have conversations, people feel left out. They don't feel, and people find that hard to understand. Like, there are a lot of places that I just don't want to go in Detroit anymore because I don't want to go someplace and be treated like I don't belong there. I don't want to have to call you to tell you come get me out of jail. So it's like just the feeling you want to be able to feel like this is your city. And a part of that, a part of what made Detroit has been commercialized or whitewashed, if you will. And so it has a different feeling.
All right, most definitely. Karen definitely had a take on really a lot of these reflections and giving us some up-to-date numbers. Tamesa back in the studio, she was texting us like, hey, you seeing this? You seeing this? You seeing this? Tamesa, what's going on with these numbers and what we seeing?
Yeah, I'm back and I got the numbers with me. So if you want to look at the mayoral race, which is the one that everybody's talking about, again, I'm on DetroitMI.gov looking at the election results. And right now, Council President Mary Sheffield is leaving people in the dust. She has 24,642 votes for mayor in the city of Detroit, which is 53.84% of the vote. So she is well ahead of all of the other candidates. Coming in at not really a close second, but coming in at second is Reverend Solomon Kinlock, still in second place with 7,711 votes, which right now is 16.85% of the vote. So quite a chasm between 1 and 2. But still, the night is still young for the most part. Number 3 is Santil Jenkins, 6,210 votes, 13.57% of the vote. So really what we're seeing right now is a fight for number 2, which is what Bryce was talking about earlier today. I mean, Council President Sheffield had a very well-run campaign. We've been seeing her for months and months and months now. So this is really just a testament to her hard work and her boots on the ground strategy of getting on the doors and talking to people and being in front of people at every moment possible. And I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with this second place, because it's a little close. It's 16% versus 13% between Reverend Solomon Kinlock and Santil Jenkins. So I'm very excited to see how that's going to play out. But if you guys want to look at some of the council races, because we also have 3 council races that had a primary this evening as well. And when you have more than 2 candidates, you automatically have to have a primary. So in District 2, we can look at those numbers as well. We had Helena Scott running, Roy McAllister running, who is a previous incumbent, and then we have the current incumbent, Angela Whitfield Callaway. Currently, right now, member Callaway, who's currently on the city council, is in the lead at 42.67% of the vote. She has received 3,647 votes so far. And then close behind her is Roy McAllister with 31.18% of the vote. He's received 2,665 votes. So we got a close race going on in District 2 right now, which is one of those really important districts with a lot of really important neighborhoods. Council District 5, which is where I live. So I'm really paying attention to this one. And I've talked to a lot of these candidates as well. So this is actually a really, really close race. So number 1 right now is Miss Renata Miller. She's gotten 22.92% of the votes. 1,507 votes have been cast in her favor. Number 2 is Police Commissioner Willie Burton, who has gotten 20.89% of the vote. He's received 1,374 votes. So they are right there together. And then, so I'm trying to see the percentage of the vote that we have gotten so far. And honestly, it is not that much. According to this, voter turnout is only at 8.93%, according to this. I want to make sure that that is accurate, but that's what the site is reporting right now. And so we are seeing kind of like a little bit of low voter turnout. And of course, the night is still young. We still have votes to count. So I just want to make sure that I put that disclaimer out there as I'm reporting these numbers. And then the last district that had a primary is City Council District 7, which is on the west side, the southwest side of Detroit. Right now, coming in the lead is State Representative Karen Whitsett. She has 39.45% of the vote. And Denzel McCampbell is a close second with 28.44% of the votes cast, 1,601 votes going to him. So we got some close races in some of these city council districts. And then in the mayoral race, it's not so close. So that's what the numbers are looking like right now, Kari.
It's interesting even looking at these numbers, especially District 7 is surprising just with a lot of that push. Denzel was turning over so many different stones. We definitely know the political machine connected to just being in the state house that Karen had with her. That's a little bit shocking. And then that is an open seat because that was where Fred Durhal was. And District 7 is where, when we talk about Denzel, Denzel Turner now resides. Before we even get into that District 7 and what that district kind of looks like in the arc, I want to lift up definitely advocate for so long, activist in that community. Elena Herrada left a quote, about tax injustice and just who was present for a lot of this, so this is things that people need to connect with. Elena has been organizing with definitely Detroiters for Tax Justice. That's one of the many efforts that I know that she's been a part of, and so many other efforts for so long. Definitely one of the connections that I have that go back to the Michigan Citizen days, uplifting and knowing things. Residents pay for schools and libraries and get tax capture. So the tax capture is the Detroiters for Tax Justice, always uplifting. If people don't understand what a tax capture is, and when you spoke about District 7 and Fred Durhal, he's one that definitely looks at it and says, okay, we got to look at how we reanimate this, and is supportive of it, but it's capturing taxes that are devoted for like schools and libraries that have been definitely looked at for taxes and diverting them to other municipal government business. It's upsetting because, especially when we think about the libraries, it's still libraries that haven't been open since COVID-19. That's upsetting, but not necessarily just that scope. District 7 is one of those districts where residential and a lot of industrial. It's on the cusp of Dearborn, how people kind of know it, but it also stretches over to like Dexter. And it's reanimating too, as a lot of the district's lines have changed too. So, I was a District 2 guy, but now I'm a District 5 guy. So many things have changed in this election too. So I think that may have an impact. And this is even the first time we're bringing it up on this broadcast, as we've talked about it before on Detroit Next. But these are things to kind of keep in mind and consider. Denzel and that footprint goes like as far as Rouge and many other things. It's a large district west. Um, what's your take of D7 being a resident over there, Mr. Turner?
Yeah, so District 7 is a neighborhood I didn't know, or a district, I should say, that I didn't know a ton about growing up, but grew up in close proximity. So I grew up in District 1, Schoolcraft and Greenfield. And so now starting to, over the last couple of years, being able to matriculate into the area, it's really has a lot of rich community from people who have been over in at least my section of District 7, which is closer to Dearborn, been over there for generations, and just having the opportunity to be able to go around to like the different community garage sales that they do in the summer and just talk to people about their stories, their backgrounds, meet their grandkids and their kids that they may be still live in the house with for multiple generations. You have a lot of that over there, which is really cool. Definitely a lot of families and family oriented in that particular district, and then starting to see more of that gentrification when you get closer to Dexter, which is something that was eye opening for me, especially me spending time away from the city and then moving back to the city. And it's like, wait, because during my high school years, I lived in the North End, not too far from, like, literally, I could walk to my old house from where we are right now. And Detroit is a different space, but to see how it's starting to transform now, like that Dexter and Davidson, Dexter and Linwood area, and what it's going to turn into, and then also the focus of it being getting potentially getting its own designation as like a business hub. I think it's really cool and dope. But you know, you also ask some questions about that as well as to who is this really for, and what does that entail for future iterations of certain neighborhoods. So that's kind of my take on District 7 without putting on my tinfoil hat.
All right. So with that being said, also you've definitely watched a lot of this from these council races as we talk about it. What stands out to you, Bryce, about this? I'm looking even at the D5. Renata definitely a lot of support of a lot of the unions, the Black Slate from that scope, but it's still a tight race looking at D5. It's not like someone's way in front. I'm very interested what the two candidates that emerged from that, and a lot of strong candidates even there. George Adams, Willie Burton, Esther Hagebuck, Tatiana Jackson. Like, this is one of those. What was the forum like in D5 when you delivered that?
Yeah, so the forum was interesting because it was the first forum where I really hadn't met a lot of the people running in person. Like I had met George, I had met Esther, I had met Willie. And I think that's it for people I had met in person. I think everyone else I had either only talked through email or phone call. So that forum was really interesting to just get a sense of who these people are as candidates. We also had a lot of the write-ins show up for that event to just try to boost their profile a little bit. About half the crowd was people running for office of some sort, and we had a big crowd. So I thought it was really interesting to hear from them. I think when I look at the initial numbers, the thing that shocks me, a name that I didn't hear much today, Willie Burton has 20%. Now he is the current police commissioner for District 5. He, he's been in that seat for a while, so people in the district definitely know him. He's a familiar name, so I'm not surprised to see he's doing well. I'm just surprised I didn't really hear his name all that much throughout this process. A name that I heard a lot was George Adams Jr., and he's not doing so hot right now. Obviously, it's early, so that could change, but it's very tight in District 5, as I expected it to be. Anytime you have that many people running for a vacancy, it should be competitive. I guess what I am expecting to see for the rest of the night, I'm expecting to see it tighten up with some of the other candidates who are on the ballot in D5. I don't know that anyone will run away with it with the remaining votes that have yet to be counted, but at this point, yeah, it's looking like we see some people who are gonna for sure be moving on.
And as we talk about moving on, at large is also one of those things that it definitely looks like incumbency is reigning supreme. But when we talk also about at large, an article that I uplifted from Khan, and Khan is actually online. I'm about to bring him in. That was talking about pastors in the position of being the mayor, but more so in municipal leadership here, politically. He spoke to Keith Butler, and that's where it's like, okay, it's been heavy in my mind and in the past of that, but we're gonna welcome him on right now. You can check that. Khan, what is going on, my brother?
Yes, sir, Curry. How are you today?
All is well, all is well, all is well. We are in studio, and it looks like you at the gym or something.
Yeah, I am.
I got you. I got you. So I want to give you a chance to writing. You did 2 pieces for Bridge Detroit. Bryce is right here in studio, kind of talking about how that connected. But just from that perspective of people always saying church and state and where that balance is, what was the take that you got just getting the information on that?
Well, I will say this, and I shared this, I believe, with Lauren, the editor over at Bridge Detroit, is that I talked to a good 10 people that really weren't invested from a mayoral race when it came to church and state, because their thing was that, a mayor has very limited control over our lives. A mayor can't decide on what a woman can do with their body. And so some of the things they cared the most about, they didn't see where necessarily uh, a Christian conscience, as Pastor Kinlock said in the debate, will come into play as far as that decision making. What they cared about, that came up over and over, was the man that have 2 jobs, and I, had one Detroiter who said flat out that if it's between his church or Detroit, he's going to choose his church. That's what she firmly believed, and that's why she said she was voting for Mary. And I can't name the Detroiter because she didn't let me use that quote in my article, but I love the quote because it was so a matter of fact. That was what she cared about.
That's that's an interesting take. That's an interesting take. And I see Mr. Turner actually wants to give a piece on that. What would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so actually I thought about this over last week, and what I realized is that it's no secret that Pastor Kinlock has mentioned that he's not interested in preaching forever. And the reason why I'm prefacing what I'm about to say with that is, at some point in time, probably in the near future, this is just me all speculating, he's probably going to leave the church one way or another, and this would have been an avenue for him to do so. And what I realized in my thinking and going down that rabbit hole was that people are concerned because he hasn't definitively came out and said, hey, I am going to be the mayor of Detroit, and that is going to be my full-time job. Because with someone who has such a large following, church following, and a congregation the way that he has, you cannot come out and definitively make that statement until you are officially on the other side, or you are going to lose members and you are going to take away from everything that you have built within that church right now. Now, that doesn't go to say I don't know what a contingency plan would look like if he is elected and is able to move on to whatever. But there's no way right now at this point you can go and say, I'm 100% going to be the mayor of Detroit. You kind of have to straddle that fence because that situation is going to be so delicate. And anybody who grew up in a black church, goes to a black church right now, or ever visited a black church, you can probably understand the delicacy of that. Where even on some Sundays, where if your normal pastor is not there and they have a guest pastor, people, and they know you're not going to be there, they will not show up. Also, those donations are going to be a little bit lighter than they was, or those tithes are going to be a little bit lighter than they were the time before. So for somebody like Kinlock and of his stature to make a definitive announcement like that right now, that could severely impact the church. So I can understand why he is more so straddling the fence right now, or not making a definitive statement on what that would look like for him.
And the definitive statement I thought was made as he said, no, I'm going to be in both positions at the same time. And Triumph isn't your usual church. Yeah. It's multiple campuses across the Metro Detroit area.
40,000 members.
40,000
members. I said 40,000 members. And you know what? 40,000 total membership across the 7 campuses. 2 of the campuses or churches, whatever, however you refer to them, are in Detroit. I like the point he made. I kind of compare it to, how you have a college football coach, and he's hot, and it's the rumor he's going to go to the 49ers. And when they ask him, he said, "No, I am the coach of Michigan. I'm the coach of Michigan State." But the rumor is he's going to go to the 49ers. And so he straddles the fence and kind of, he gives definitive statements without giving definitive statements of the future. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to be the coach of Michigan. You know what I mean? And so because him to say that he's planning on leaving means that he won't be able to recruit. He's putting the livelihood of his assistant coaches in jeopardy. For him to just come all out and say, "I am going to leave and go pro." But when that contract comes for all the millions to go to the NFL, then it's over now. Okay, he's there, he's gone. You know what I mean? And it is what it is. So this feels a lot similar.
Yeah, and I see Bryce definitely wants to add a couple 2 cents. So we got comments going and everything. Bryce, I'm about to kick it over your way.
It's funny that you brought up the straddling that line. I remember when we put out an article about Ken Lock's stance on the LGBTQ community and that he would not adopt his church's policy if he's elected mayor. There were people in the comments who were like feeling betrayed by their pastor. They're like, he is choosing politics over the word of God and all of these things for saying what you'd want any mayoral candidate to say. It's like, I'm not going to be anti-LGBTQ. But the fact that his congregants want him to be the same way he is as pastor and to lead the city the way that the church is led, not all of them, but some of them very vocally so, I should add, that does kind of give you the inkling of like, okay, there are some people that are voting for him specifically because they like the way that church is run. They like the way he is pastor there. And the question I have for a lot of people is, how do you see that translating? Detroit is a city that not everyone is Christian. Not everyone grew up in church. Not everyone currently goes to church. How do you see that translating to people, especially as we were talking about in the context of the millennial and Gen Z voters? How do you see that translating to people who are constantly inundated with the idea that they need to go elsewhere to succeed?
Take that to Con. We taking that to you.
That is a great question. And to Bryce's point, if you go by however much you value polls as it relates to religion and people who practice, a lot of polls and surveys show that the amount of Christians in the Black community are down. The amount of African Americans that go to church are down, and so that importance of a preacher saying that, and I'm sure if he would have made that statement 20 years ago, he probably wouldn't have made it. You know what I mean? When times were different and politics were different and acceptance of LGBTQ rights and were different. You know what I mean? So I think that's an extremely valid. I like that Bryce said that. I think that's an extremely valid point as far as it relates to Detroiters. And I think it goes back to earlier what I said as far as that, how a lot of people aren't invested in that part of it as much. You know what I mean? A lot of people who are determining, I'm sure there's no way, I don't think there's no way to poll people that are voting for him or not voting for him as far as the reason. But I'm guessing if there came a reason, it by far would be more of the fact that he has 2 jobs, that would by far exceed the reason versus any morals he does or doesn't stand on as far as just being a pastor. That has not come up as much, I think, as everybody thought it was. I call it the traditional church and state argument. You know what I mean? Because that's what it is. It's the traditional argument. It just didn't feel like Detroiters, just non-Christian or Christians, were invested quite that much.
Well, with that being said, we're gonna let you get back to that set. It looks like I don't even know. It looks like you about to curl or something. We're gonna let you get back
All
to
right,
the set.
Kari. All right, Brian. All right, y'all have a good one, man.
We'll get you in the mix. Yes, sir. All
I'll be
right. All right, so that was Khan tapping in. And as we're getting into right now, the third leg of everything that we're doing, it's like 30 minutes left in what we're doing with our watch. But you all see the numbers that are definitely coming in. That race for who's number 2 is definitely big. And oof, man, City Council 5, District 5 is very, very interesting. And as a D5 resident, I'm going to definitely get to Mesa back up here to talk a little bit about being another D5 resident. It's such an interesting, it's such an interesting district because it's vast, so vast. It's like Indian Village to my neighborhood. And I'm like, literally, I'm Rosa Parks and the lodge is over here in Davison. So like it stretches as far as over here to like Hope Village, all the way to Indian Village. It is Wayne State, is downtown. It's so much of the city of Detroit. So when we think about D5, it's changed, but that also, as we can kind of see right now, it's been a platform for Mary Sheffield, who is heavy in the run for being the next mayor of the city of Detroit, heavy in the lead. So like this scope that I want to play another clip that we got here, and we're going to play a clip for Mary Sheffield talking about her time as council president.
We are here with Council President Mary Sheffield. Thank you so much for being on the program. It's
Thank
good
you
to
for
see you.
having me always.
So I want to talk about your role as City Council President. Before Stephen and I were talking about how it's kind of not typically been a path to the mayor's office, city council members. Here in Detroit, the president is selected by colleagues. They have to basically vouch that they want you to lead them. What comes with that responsibility? Like, tell us, what is the role of the council president?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think a lot of people don't know is we serve as the administrative kind of branch of overseeing the operations of all the employees on the 13th floor. And so all of the administrative staff we oversee. And so that function comes under the council president's office. But traditionally, outside of that, I mean, we run the formal sessions, ensure that the agenda is set, that appropriate items are referred to committees, and I preside over the formal session on Tuesdays, and then the administrative function as well. I think it's a great opportunity, though, because the last 12 years serving on council, the perception of the city council has changed drastically. And people oftentimes say, this has not been a path to the mayor's office. And I understand why, because in the past, council always had, and we still are blamed for everything. But
I
now,
see it every week.
We are. But now I think it's more, this council was at least working with the mayor. There's more collaboration. There's not this adversarial bickering, pointing fingers, not getting things done. But we're talking, we're working together, and there's progress. And I think the overall perception of the city council has changed compared to years ago, where people looked at council as it was dysfunctional, it was not professional, there was a lot of bickering, name calling. And that whole atmosphere, I believe, has changed, which has allowed a different perception, which I think will help in this upcoming race.
Yeah, I think that's really worth emphasizing. The mayor's talked about this a lot at his State of the City events, that the relationship is much improved.
Yes.
I think it was in 2021, we had a pretty new slate of council members elected. A lot of people who were there are on their first term. A lot of longer time members like you and Pro Tem Tate. What do you think really changed to restore that kind of perception of the council being more functional and doing, what its job is?
Yeah, I would just say new leadership, understanding where we've come from. A lot of the dysfunction led us to, decline. We came out of bankruptcy. We were not getting things done. And I think it was a disservice to our residents. And I think people wanted to see leadership that was able to get things done. And so with the new council, with council by districts, I think also played a role, which allowed, for example, someone like myself to be elected for the first time in the history of Detroit. It allowed for a new slate of leaders and bringing a different perception, a different method of leadership that allows now for that collaborative effort and professionalism that I think we all deserve.
So you've called yourself the most qualified candidate in this race. Tell me about some of the things that you've been able to accomplish in the last decade, being at the top of the council.
Yeah, so aside from the people's bills, which I do encourage the listening audience to go view.
BridgeDetroit.com, we've got some reporting on that as well.
Yeah, please do, and thank you for covering that, because it's really over 20 pieces of legislation that really came from grassroots up. It came from the people. It came from listening to the concerns of everyday voices and responding not with just rhetoric, but literally with sound policy to address those issues. So over 20 pieces of legislation. Aside from that, just the investment in parks, the amount of economic development, the $1 billion that we've created in affordable housing over the last 8 to 10 years, I definitely played a huge role in getting that happen, making that happen. The amount of jobs that we've created for Detroiters, the investment in our parks, the crime reduction that we see in Detroit, all of these things are in partnership with the city council and my office to ensure that the progression of our city is moving forward.
All right, definitely. As we see Sheffield talking about what that role as council president is, and that's another thing. We'll have a whole new city council president for the city of Detroit, which that's going to be interesting. But D5, it's a very tight race. We're in that district. It's such a big district, and as the redistricting was taking place, which this is how like census connects to like, do we even need council by district, and so many things that did change around, all come into play. Because when I think about my Hope Village community, right here in this pocket, like Rosa Parks, Davison, and now I'm competing with like what's going to happen with the Renaissance Center. It's like, what will that be? Even if we have that council member that is listening to, what's happening in Hope Village, how would that balance be? We did a candidate meet and greet at Greater Quinn, AME down the street from me on Davison and Rosa Parks, as we say, like my neighborhood for real. It's like down the street, literally. We were looking to have that at Cool Cities Park, but even though it didn't rain, we were preparing for rain that day because that's what the forecast said. But you were with me to Mesa, also with Tegan Humphrey. Shout out to Tegan, also in the Detroit is Different team when we do the political things and so much more. Interviewed a lot of the candidates, and many of them for D5. I got to George Adams after the fact in studio because I thought it was just so important, because I know how important this race is. But Willie Burton and let's see, Esther Hoggabook came out, Renata Miller, like everyone from D5 was almost in effect. Even Whitney Cummings was.
Donna Jackson was there.
Yep. So what's your take on just being in D5, knowing that it's such a big district that really is like the whole footprint of the city of Detroit when you think about it? It's east side, west side, downtown, and even midtown.
Absolutely. I mean, D5 is home for me. It's the place that I rest. But it's just like you said, Car. D5 is a representation of all types of Detroiters. You got people who live in high rises. You have people who live in duplexes like myself. You have renters. You have owners. You have some of the biggest business interests are represented in District 5. You have the Hudson site is in District 5. You have, the Illages and their holdings is in District 5. So there's a lot of money in District 5 as well as a lot of people. And so whoever holds that seat is going to have some really important constituents, some really powerful constituencies to contend with. I think Council President Sheffield really carried a lot of that very, very well during her time. And I just think that District 5 is going to be, eyes are going to be on District 5. If Council President Sheffield becomes mayor, then that will be, the district that she came from to become mayor. And it's like you said, people, they recognize that. They recognize everything that's going on in District 5. And so right now, we have a really tight race. We have Renata Miller in first place, and then we have Willie Burton, who is currently in second place. And as you mentioned earlier, people kind of know Willie Burton. He is currently the police commissioner for District 5. And I live in District 5 as well. And so I've been walking around the neighborhoods and the communities, and everywhere I've gone, I've seen, if I've gone to a business, the place where I get my nails done, I saw a Willie Burton yard sign up on the door. I've seen Willie Burton at the laundromat that I go to. And as I walk through, Boston Edison and neighborhoods of that nature, I've seen Renata Miller signs. I've seen Mary Sheffield signs. And so these campaigns have been getting out. They've been getting to the places where the people in District 5 actually are. And I think that has been represented very well in the kind of voter turnout that they're seeing today. And so I like the candidates. And shout out to Bridge Detroit, because I didn't know that many of the candidates before I went to their D5 candidate forum over in Eastern Market. And that's where I first got to see Renata Miller, and then I was able to interview Willie Burton myself at the candidate meeting greet that we did, and he's really interesting to me because he was a police commissioner, but in his role as a police commissioner, he talked a lot about the social justice that he was working on. I think during that time they were trying to use some technology, some facial recognition technology that was, misidentified Black people a lot of the time, and he was against that. And you don't see that a lot. And so I was really interested in hearing about his take on, being near law enforcement and being a police commissioner, but being there in sort of a social justice type of posture. I thought that was interesting. And same thing with Renata Miller. She is represented by the unions. She's on the east side of the district. So like you said, with District 5, it runs from east to west. And so she's the president of, I want to say, Historic Indian Village. Yeah.
Indian Village. And
Yeah.
I interviewed her, and she definitely spoke to, and we'll be coming on Detroit is Different soon. We working that out, and I definitely see possibly Mr. Burton as well. But a lot of what was happening with flooding, and a lot of that flooding that was going on there, and making sure that residents are cared for in that whole footprint, even beyond what Indian Village looks like. So this is like that scope. So like you're looking at a whole different arc of like so many different resident issues when we look at this footprint. That's why I think D5 is really like citywide. It's as vast as citywide, but it's not citywide. And even looking at the campaign financing and the money's into it, and nothing really so out of bounds that you wouldn't expect. It definitely was a lot of grassroots work that you can see covering that footprint. And I've seen many of the different candidates circling around. It was good to definitely make those connections and talk to them at the candidate meet and greet. But I've been seeing a lot of Renata Miller, as you said. I've been seeing some Willie Burton, but Willie, I know, has already relationships that already exist, as does George Adams, has many relationships in community on this side of town. But because it goes so far and it's so vast, it's other footprints. But Miss Jackson as well. Miss Jackson, I believe it was taken to interview her, but even her vote, it's that she's been getting and reaching out to like younger constituents and the millennials, in different work that she's done in activism and advocacy around cultural advocacy and speaking to that. I'm very interested in what that D5 seat will look like, especially moving forward. But along with that D5 seat and moving forward, you got a little take on like what's gonna be council president. How will that look, you think, moving forward? How will that be? Because that relationship's going to be very key, especially when it comes to D5 and who's going to look to assume that, being that that person will be new. I would doubt that. It could be somebody at large, because you see those at large seats, just incumbency, just running rampant with that.
Yeah. So as far as city council president is concerned, I don't know that the D5 person will be a shoo-in just because Mary Sheffield was D5. But if you look at, like you said, Car, if you look at the incumbents, you still have Mary Waters, who would be coming back if she wins, Coleman Young. But then also, council president pro tem James Tate could also be throwing his hat in the ring for council president, because he has been on council. I want to say he and Mary Sheffield were like the longest running.
Tenure, yes.
Right. And so he has relationships with these mayoral candidates. Of course, he's on council right now with Council President Sheffield. He was on council before with Santel Jenkins. She could be number two. And so I believe they were elected together in that last election before we went to districts. And so he would have a relationship with all of those people. He would have a relationship with the new council members coming on. And so he might be one of the people that's going to be in the running for that as well. And so that's what we kind of have to look for, right? Who's going to be the person that's going to be the leadership? Because the council president, as we heard Council President Sheffield say, it's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of organizational responsibility that happens. You assign pieces of legislation to committees. You assign committee chairmanships. And so it's a lot that goes into being council president, and that's going to be important as well.
Definitely important. I'm looking forward to, I would definitely see James Tate has that tenure and very well respected with many of the acts. I mean, actually tomorrow he's going to be doing something like in D7, but very close to me at the Harmony Cafe on Dexter, doing the Protect Your Crown work. And I'm going to definitely make myself present for that 10 a.m. tomorrow on Wednesday. And along with that, just I'll be running some clips from when we did our interview not too long ago very soon, too. Probably even starting tomorrow, just all depending upon what happens in the edits, or maybe next week. But very, very soon. Councilmember Tate is one of those voices that I think that does exist, that many people do have respect for. Okay, Elena, so much information. Willie Burton held the line all alone for Detroit police commissioners, was even removed. Yes, I do remember that. Yes, about the facial recognition. He's paid a lot of dues. So definitely getting the tip of the hat and getting that type of accolades from Elena speaks volumes about your relationship with advocacy and activists that do exist. It looks like you got some updates on some current numbers. What's going on? What's going on, Tamesa?
Yeah, no, we just got another update on the numbers. Right now, it's saying that we are at 11.42% turnout. So there are, according to the City of Detroit website, there are 518,000 registered voters. 11.42% of those people have voted. And right now, if you look at the mayoral race, Council President Sheffield is still in the lead. She has jumped up to 30,000 votes, 30,739 votes. So she still sits at 52% of the votes cast. In second place, we still have Reverend Solomon Kinlock at 10,091 votes. So he is at 17% of the vote now, with Santil Jenkins following up at a close third with 14% of the vote. She's received 8,464 votes at this time. So Council President Mary Sheffield is totally and completely in the lead, and it's still a fight for second, although that gap between second and third looks like it's widening a little bit. Let's move to District 5, which we just got finished talking about. So in the new update, Renata Miller is still in first place with 23.41% of the vote. She's received 2,112 votes so far. Now that second spot is getting a little bit closer. So Willie Burton now has 19.77% of the vote. And then Tajana Jackson and Esther Hoggabook, my neighbor, are very close with 17% of the vote and 17.28% of the vote. So they are right there together. So we're looking at Renata Miller and Willie Burton still with the third coming up pretty closely. Let's move on to Council Seat 7. And this one, we talked about this a little bit before, but this one is kind of a little bit of a shocker. Karen Winsett, current state representative, is leading with 2,578 votes. She currently has 36% of the vote, with Denzel McCampbell at 31% of the vote. So this is very, very close. Denzel McCampbell has 2,222 votes right now. So that's what, 300 votes, a 300 vote difference between the first spot and the second spot for District 7. So very tight race there. And then District 2, I will go to, is pretty much looking the same right now. Member Calloway, who is the current incumbent, has 43% of the vote. She has received 4,556 votes so far. And Roy McAllister coming in second with 30% of the vote. He has received 3,176 votes. So the city council races are very, very, very close tonight. And as you mentioned earlier, Kari, the incumbents in the at-large race are really just head and shoulders above everybody else. Coleman A. Young has received 32,000 votes, and Mary Waters has received 33,000 votes. So they are the top two vote getters in the at-large race.
Yeah, this is where they talk about incumbency matters. We have back in studio Bryce. As we get to this last leg, we got about 6 more minutes on this broadcast, but you already know you can go to bridgedetroit.com and you're going to get so much more of this information. And we definitely want you to keep watching Detroit Next. Thank you all so much for checking out this. And this ain't like the full last lap, but I want you to talk a little bit about incumbency and the strength of that always seems to exist. So that incumbency meaning is like, if you're already in that seat, chances are you're going to stay in that seat.
Yeah, and that's a rule of thumb in any kind of election, municipal, state, federal, all of the above. If you are the incumbent, as long as all-out disaster didn't strike while you were in office, chances are you have a much better chance of being reelected. And I think in a city like Detroit, one of the biggest, most obvious reasons is just the name recognition. If you've won a race before, it's just easier to convince people you can win another race. And I think when we're seeing with Coleman and Mary's dominance in that at-large race, a pretty crowded field of candidates, it's just you get to the ballot and you look at the names that you recognize. And I wish it wasn't necessarily that case, but I think it goes to that point of name recognition, but also when you hear the candidates talk. If you are the incumbent, you are currently living that reality of what the job is. It's just easier to convince people that you know what you're talking about. It's easier to be able to pull relevant work experience and examples for voters to understand what it is that you do. It just gives you a leg up in a lot of different areas. Not to mention, if you're on city council, people can tune in and see you talk every week.
It's very unique also because Janae Ayers is also in that race again, and she had that seat at one point in time when an investigation that really didn't go anywhere, but it definitely happened like right before the race happened, and many people were like, all right, this for sure doesn't look right. But we do remember what happened the last election cycle ago, and that for sure changed and shifted so much. But she's in this race too, and I was expecting so many more of that to be such a tighter race with her.
In third place.
So what were you gonna say about that, Tamesa?
No, I was just going to say Janae Ayers is actually in third place. I mean, while the incumbents are sort of, head and shoulders above her, she has received 13,312 votes, which is a lot more than a lot of the other candidates have received as well. And so I think that's important to know. Like, her name is also recognized as well. And even in District 2, you have a former incumbent running against a current incumbent, because Roy McAllister was the city council person for District 2 before Angela Callaway was elected. And so, and then she beat him out, and now he's coming back to run against her again. So this is two people with name recognition and two people who had incumbency. Remember, Callaway just happens to hold the incumbency right now, and I think that's giving her a leg up.
Yeah, Elena also brought up that Ken Cockrell Jr. lost to Dave Bean. I do remember that, but I look at that as like that was a different type of election. As that was an interesting and insightful episode with Ken Cockrell Jr. On Detroit Next. Check our archives that he spoke to. What were you going to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely interesting to point out that he did lose to Bing, someone who did not live in the city. I should add. But he did lose to Bing, but he was not elected as mayor. He
That's
was
what I was going
elected
to say.
as a city council member. And I think it's, if you're the incumbent in a seat that you were not originally elected to, some of that advantage does go away. Especially like when you look at the turmoil of him being put in that position. That's just a very unique situation to call him the incumbent in, but technically you are correct. He was the incumbent and lost to Dave Bing.
Yes, I was going to uplift that. And now we're getting to like that final last leg. It's 2 minutes left on our broadcast here. This was, as we say, we working it out. Y'all already saw some of the kinks, but I feel like tonight's broadcast was very insightful. Hopefully it was fun for you all. It was good having this flow of discussion. I want to thank everyone from this that came out, and I'm gonna let you all give y'all a piece too. But Denzel Turner, Black Fridays. Hopefully y'all are checking out that podcast. He gave a good point. Con Santori, the author and writer, and definitely from the gym, talking about just what's going to play at just from the pulpit to politics. That definitely was some good insight right there. And obviously in studio, Tamesa and Bryce. Tamesa, I'm going to pass it over to you with We Own Everything and also public comment.
Yeah, absolutely. We own everything. Political consulting company specializing in political education. Very excited to be here this evening to share the numbers with you guys, to go over some of the issues, to talk about the candidates. I mean, this is what it's all about. This is really the bread and butter of what it is that I'm trying to do. And then public comment, just tune in on Thursday mornings. Me, Kari, and Malachi, we really get into the issues. We really talk about a lot of good stuff that really is going to impact Detroiters. I mean, this is where we have the policy conversations that you guys need to know about, because it's going to impact you. And so I'm just excited to be a voice and a part of the activities.
And also Detroit Next, if you're like, okay, I got to take, and I definitely need that political take taken, you need to email this man, Bryce. Let the people know what's up.
Yes. Thank you for having me on. And of course, shout out to Public Comment, to Mesa. That show is very much part of the fabric, part of the DNA of what Detroit Next is currently. Stay tuned. We have interviewed all the 9 candidates. I'm very curious to see how the official results turn out tonight. And we're going to be back with it in the next couple of weeks. We are going to be on break for a week, I believe, correct? Before we're back in studio.
I don't know. I don't think we recording. We record on like every other Thursdays and stuff like that. I'm open to it, but we just got to see what that would be. But I think so much is going to be decided in the next couple hours. What jumps out?
Yeah. So definitely stay tuned to Detroit Next. Stay tuned to bridgedetroit.com. Shout out to Malachi Barrett. He is our City Hall politics reporter who is also part of Detroit Next, part of Public Comment. He does such a good job of just breaking down what is happening at City Council, what is happening on the policy side of things. If you are not already signed up for his newsletter, sign up for the City Council notebook for free. Don't have to go anywhere. The news just hits your inbox. Isn't that convenient? So shout out to him. Shout out to what we're doing here at Bridge Detroit. Shout out to Detroit is Different for having an election night live stream like this. And yeah, that's all I got to say.
All right. With that being said, make sure you stay tuned and we're doing it. Peace.